Hello, my name is Irene Foley, and I'm a clinical psychologist working in the children's autism team. I am delighted to be able to offer this webinar on autism and anxiety. So it's a series of 3 parts, and this is the first part. So 10 things your child with autism wants you to know. Anxiety is a very common emotion in lots of children with autism. The world presents so many challenges and it's a source of lots of confusion. And I hope by listening to these tips that you can help your child reduce some of that anxiety to manageable levels. So the first part is talking about, I suppose, preventative, proactive strategies that we know can help reduce anxiety. So we'll just make a start. So help me understand emotions in general, and in particular, what is anxiety? Help me find out how anxiety affects me, find out more about my patterns and triggers, help others to know me, my triggers, and ways to help. If possible, remove or reduce the source of my anxiety. I need more breaks and chill time. I need you to make the world more predictable. I need you to slow down talking. And I need you to explain things very clearly to me. And I need you to understand why this is hard for me. So look, we'll make a start. And this content is brief. It does assume a sort of a knowledge of autism and what autism is. So the first thing, help me understand emotions. So lots of children with autism struggle to understand emotions, and they take a long time to register their feelings in their bodies. They may not realize until their emotions reach a very high level that they're actually feeling an emotion. So it looks like a very intense reaction all of a sudden. So one of the first things is a really good first step is to teach about emotions, why we have them and how they affect us. And that can really help them gain more understanding of their emotional internal world. There is a pack attached to this webinar. And in the pack, there is resources, there is a social story about emotions, and there's some further information about emotions. So what does happy, sad and angry and anxious, confused look like for me? What does these emotions feel like for me? So it's about trying to use, again, visuals and think, in terms of emotion education. So help me identify my emotions, help me assess the strength of my emotions and respond appropriately to my emotions. And there's a few different ways to do that. So just in terms of just education, so it's just about introduction to feelings, what they are, where in our body we feel them, what they mean. And really feelings are protective, emotions are protective, they signal to us either positive or negative information. So look, there is loads of, I suppose, resources out there just on general feelings. It's just getting the right age and stage in terms of their books and the resources. So there's lots of things for younger children, middle childhood and teenagers on that topic. And it's also just even having that emotional language in the house. You yourself talking about emotions and how it feels inside and where you feel it in your body, and what you maybe have the urge to do, and how to stop and think. So some of the emotion visuals that we would think about is sort of, facial expressions, around emotions, and maybe for some children, the more emoji type feelings charts are okay, but for others, they might need more photographs and more sort of visual, sort of true life facial expressions. The motion sensation wheel I really like because it gives a very visual way of thinking about emotion. Emotion, such as, suppose, an abstract concept that we really need to teach emotion, what it is and where we feel it and why we have these emotions. And that idea of the body and being able to register and check your body for these signs is really important. So these are just some other examples of visuals to think about identifying emotion and identifying the intensity of the emotion and maybe what to do. So I will talk further in the next section about the 5-point scale, but there are just a few examples of maybe having a common language and a common tool to use for your child or children, because all children will benefit from these strategies also. So just getting them to be more self-aware of their bodies and emotions and maybe what emotions they're feeling. So you can give that feedback too, and you can role play with them and think about facial expressions and even, using bits of art materials to depict different emotions. Okay, so then this is other, I suppose, in terms of, we try and cater for all levels of autism. So again, we're trying to use more visuals and think about, well, how can they, they may not be able to say, Mum, I'm feeling really angry. So at least they can point or they can indicate to you in other ways that they feel angry or they feel anxious, because it may not be a typical presentation what you're seeing in terms of emotion. So again, is thinking about, well, if something's wrong, maybe what is it? And having that support to do that is really important, especially for those whose communication is limited. And even for children who are quite verbal, sometimes they prefer to use visuals or a more non-verbal means to depict how they're feeling. Because lots of behaviour challenges we see do mean that children are either anxious or panicked or worried about something, but it manifests as maybe challenging behaviour. So it's important to give them a tool to be able to express themselves also. So look, help me understand emotions and then what is anxiety. So the emotion of anxiety, what it is. There is links in the attached, just about 3 minutes long. They're on YouTube. They're from Anxiety Canada website. So there's one for children and one for teens, and they're very good. It's quite animated. It goes quite quickly, but it's a very good explanation about anxiety and why we have it, and that anxiety actually is just trying to make us safe. So a very good explanation of an introduction of what is anxiety. There is also an anxiety pack as well available. And that again just explains in a bit more detail what is anxiety and how it affects us. So second one, help me find out how anxiety affects me. So again, maybe keeping a visual, thinking about, how do they know that they're becoming anxious? So try and along with them figure out where in your body do you begin when you're maybe at a low level of anxiety. Where do you feel it? Is it your tummy? Is it your head or your throat? Generally, lots of children with autism would say it's their head, but they seem to have a disconnect to their body. So trying to get them used to sort of scanning their body, just right, okay, just feel your body, feel your hands, feel your legs. What about your tummy? What about your heart rate? What about your muscles? What about your clenched? Just think about that. And you have information as well, maybe about the different levels of anxiety and how your child looks or what they do. And that's a really good communication tool as well for you to be able to say, you know, Johnny, I see you're becoming stressed. I think you're at a number 2. Let's try some relaxed breaths or playing with your stress ball. So when they're more body aware, they're more likely to be able to catch the feeling, to catch the anxiety early. So that's the key. We want to catch the anxiety early and be able to help them with that. So that self-awareness is key. So yeah, the third thing, so try and find out more about my patterns. Now, again, the very nature of autism, they find this really hard to explain. Some children are very good, very articulate. Some children who maybe internalize more things find this really hard. So we're trying to use different means to try and get them, you know, for us to figure out what their triggers are. You know, try and keep diaries and stress logs. You know, there's a copy in the pack. There is sort of the Autism NI school questionnaire on their website, and that's very good. So it's just like green, it doesn't bother me. Orange, it sometimes bothers me. And red, this really makes me stressed and anxious. So they colour in the different bullet points and the different possible triggers that it could be. Asking others to keep a record of stressful incidents. You know, if they have a classroom assistant, a teacher, sometimes they're very good at masking in school, masking their anxiety. So it might be a good idea to try and create a log and a diary at home and try and get your child to feed into that as well and get them to keep their own diary about how they felt. And as I say, the stress logs are a very good self-awareness tool for the child as well. So we want to find out their triggers. We want to find out times of the day. We want to find out, you know, is there multiple triggers? We want to find out, you know, in school, what triggers are there in school? And there's a whole host of triggers that it may be that we're not aware of. You know, we just see maybe the child coming home very distressed, or we're maybe not picking up on their anxiety. And you know, throughout the day sometimes, and that's not always easy. Children will mask very well. So it's a good idea to do some recordings and to some questionnaires as well around anxiety. And yeah, so again, I found this quote, I thought it was very good. So again, certain sounds frighten me. Dogs barking, mopeds, tractors and cars, engines of various kinds. So that's looking at something that maybe will not frighten most people, but for children with autism, it's very hard if they hear very loud, unpredictable noises. And again, it's a lovely description, or as in, it's a really insightful description of how that that trigger affect them. They would explode inside me and make me lose all sense of the way my body related to my surroundings. It was like being flung out into space, whoosh, quite without warning. Sometimes I screamed and covered my ears. Some sounds around me I hardly reacted to at all. So yeah, it's even a bit contradictory there. So it's a very just in terms of how do we understand and how do we help our young people manage when they're in stress, and how do we try and reduce the impact of that. So in terms of common triggers to my anxiety, so these could include unstructured time, any lack of routine, lots of transitions, unexpected events, and a general lack of predictability. That can be huge for children with autism. Academics, any sort of school stress, for example, tests, having to be very organised, any reading, writing, or academic task is difficult. And I think learning, just the whole general learning, is very hard for children with autism. Children with autism tend to have very fixed mindsets, so learning is uncomfortable. Mistakes aren't welcome. Mistakes are seen as very negative and a sign that, you know, they must be stupid. And again, it's trying to shift that into maybe more growth mindsets in the classroom, which is helpful. Sensory issues as well can be a huge trigger. So any, you know, large crowds, smells, having to sit too close to others, maybe corridors, people bumping into them, and noises. Even the slightest noise may really irritate your child, and you can't hear it. So they sometimes have a very super sensitive, sensory system, a system that gets easily overwhelmed. And when we're overwhelmed, we can't access learning, we can't access our emotions, we can't access, logical thought. And then another big trigger is social interaction, actually being in a social environment. So having to initiate conversations, have to respond to maybe people, understanding other social communication, um, and just having to interact and maybe with all of them other triggers around me, you know. So yeah, lots of challenges throughout the day that you may be unaware of. And these are just a few. Your child is very individual, and will have some of these, but may have others as well. And again, I always like to think about it as a stress bucket. So if you think about all the triggers that fill your child's bucket on a regular basis every day, your child's bucket might get filled really quickly, and they might have trouble managing all of the stresses. And I suppose when it gets filled very quickly, it spills out, and that's where you might see the very shutdown response, the frozen response, or you might see a very angry, getting into trouble, wanting to leave, wanting to flee. So, it just becomes very overwhelming, and they do not have the capacity then to deal with much more because their bucket's full. And, hopefully, like us all, we all hopefully start with an empty bucket when we get up in the morning. Maybe not if we haven't had our sleep. So you can imagine all the demands that are made and then the capacity. So we need to think about the demands that we place on our young people and their capacity and trying to meet them where they're at. So again, there are just some examples of some things that might fill their bucket. Again, everyone's bucket is different, but again, some of the triggers that we talked about are there. So signs, I want to talk about signs. So as I said, you anxiety, you might see the shaking, you might see maybe the face going red, you might see the, maybe more stimming, you might see more pacing, repetitive behavior. But anxiety can take many forms. And it could look like anger. It could look like more stubbornness, so increased rigidity, increase in sensory sensitivity. So they're more affected by the environment, smells, touch, sounds, more sensitive to your tone of voice. Stop shouting, you might hear, but you're not. Increased need for control. Freezing behavior. So freezing behaviors is where they're very still and seem very shut down and very blank. Um, so that can be like a common response when children mask their anxiety and they're just so overwhelmed that actually they go into like a bit of a freeze response. Physical complaints, sore heads, sore tummies, maybe bowel issues, aggression, impulsivity, and argumentativeness. So lots of signs that we see overtly that we may be mistaken for maybe bad behavior or maybe non-compliance. But usually beneath the surface, we think about anxiety and the panic and the stress and the built up of lots and lots of tricky emotions that they find it difficult to express. Um, so in terms of how they're feeling, and their thoughts and how anxiety impacts, so it's a bit like, thoughts are generally the themes around I can't cope, I'm in danger, something bad is going to happen. What if this happens? And then their actions, they tend to want to run away, avoid situations, escape, hide. And then in terms of their body, what is happening in their body. And their body sensations alone can create anxiety because it feels really uncontrollable if your heart's beating really, really fast, if you're feeling really hot, if you're feeling quite sick. So yeah, just in terms of how all of the different parts of anxiety might come together in your child. Number 4, help others to know me. This is me. So I work quite closely with schools, and I think this is a really important, you know your child, but others may not know them as well. And especially if they're new to a setting, I think a document about your child, so a written document that's visual, that they have contributed to about what they like, what they don't like, what are their interests, what are their anxiety signs, what are their triggers, what learning style suits them the best, what if, all of their common activities, or so I suppose really educating others about your child, and the more information others have about your child, the more likely they are to put in place supports. So if your child, for example, likes to, fidget or draw, to actually aid regulation and concentration. So on the surface, that looks to a teacher as if they're not paying attention, but that child is really trying to concentrate and trying to listen. But it's interpreted then differently, maybe by the teacher. You're not listening. So if that was shared information, so if everybody had that information about your child, they're more likely to be empathetic, and they're more likely to be putting in supports and accommodations that your child is going to need in school and in all the other environments as well, social environments. So not just schools, maybe think about maybe the swimming coach, the football coach. And look, I know it's something that maybe it takes a bit of work and it might need tweaked, but it's such a worthwhile thing to do. So again, there is a template attached in the documents also. Number 5, I need you to remove unnecessary sources of anxiety. So if possible, try and eliminate the trigger. So if a specific anxiety, a specific activity creates anxiety, if it's not necessary, maybe weigh up the pros and cons. Maybe if it's not essential that they're part of the school play, they may not want to take part in the school trip. It's worth considering maybe the aims of the activity, and can it be achieved through another activity. So, think about the timetable, think about, the pressure, reducing the pressure, removing the pressure of certain subjects. You can easily disapply students now, especially in secondary school, if there is ongoing evidence that it's detrimental in terms of their anxiety levels. So, trying to think about removing maybe certain smells, removing, maybe the lighting, is there a way that we can maybe have different lighting? And again, certain environments, can be quite intense and overwhelming. Is there any way we can reduce the overwhelm by maybe, turning things down? Or so it's trying to really be a bit, yeah, just thinking, well, if this is a trigger, is it necessary? Is it, weighing up the pros and cons? And that's very hard. But for me, if it's causing, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and it's not necessary, then there's other ways to support your child. And if it's something that can be easily removed, why would we not try and do that to help support them? Reducing the source of anxiety could be reducing homework, reducing classwork, reducing timetable, or reducing noise. So, sometimes it's not always possible to completely eliminate the source of anxiety, but it's usually possible to reduce the triggers. So if it's playground, you could limit the amount of time the student has to be in the playground, maybe, or if it is assembly, can we reduce the time that they're in assembly? And if it is certain subjects, can we try and differentiate the work or reduce the demands that are placed on the child? So just trying to think about how can maybe, if we can't eliminate it, can we reduce the source of it? So that'll be very individual to your child as well. Number 6, your child with autism who is anxious. or, either overtly or not, they're gonna need more breaks, and they're gonna need more downtime. They're gonna need more, I suppose, rebound time or relaxation. They've many challenges and triggers to deal with. So regular breaks that combine movement, exercise, sensory calming are really good to build into their daily routine. Calm breaks are a way of ensuring that they stay regulated throughout the day, that they're not coming home very heightened. It'll assist them as well to develop more coping strategies. When they're in a calmer state, they're more able to deal with the challenges that they have that maybe can't be removed. So again, there's lots and lots of strategies around, maybe breathing and their own interests. So it could be time alone, just in a room with music. So just depending on the child and what they really like. So we're definitely proactively building in that time throughout the day, making sure that they're getting their movement breaks, their physical breaks, the relaxation. To do that, they do need more downtime. Number 7, I need you to make the world predictable for me through visuals. The world is a very confusing place. It's very unpredictable. It's very hard for children with autism to be an environment that's very chaotic, that's very maybe inconsistent. And we know the children do better when there is routine. Visuals, it's not that we're saying there can't be changes of routine, but they seem to do better with visuals. And it's easy to sort of incorporate change early when you're using visuals. And most children would say, as long as I know what we're doing instead. So it's just making sure that predictability is there across environments, across home, across school, across any other social environments. So again, there's some examples here. So there's the morning routines, there is the school routine, the evening routine, maybe a shower routine. And no matter what age and stage your child is at, please try and think about incorporating visuals to their day, especially if they're anxious. And sometimes we need to go back to a time where there's more visuals, and visuals can be age appropriate. So I'll just show you some more. So examples of using visuals. So again, help to make with decision making, like a choice board, or having a to-do list. Like we all use visuals. I use diaries, I use to-do lists, whiteboards. Many parents say whiteboards are brilliant. Calendars, and a visual list of what you need to bring in the school bag. Things about a mind map to organise ideas, maybe if they're studying for a test. Other ideas is to, again, using facial expressions to convey emotions, a pain scale to think about communicating their pain, visual timers to think about how long a task is going to last. So when does it begin and when does it end? What is the place that I'm going to that I've never been to? What does it look like? So maybe Google Maps, YouTube videos of maybe holiday destinations or hotels or restaurants that you're going to go to, or labeling drawers with pictures of what's in them. And again, like I said, a morning evening routine or a task that is broken down into different parts so it's easily understood, and there's pictures and written instructions. So I know I do better with pictures and written instructions, and I do better when I see things, and I do better, when I know when things start and when they're going to end. So it really does create predictability, and it lessens confusion, and it helps reduce anxiety, and it also promotes independence. And again, that's just an example of consequences, and choices. So sometimes children will need that instead of you giving to them verbally, they need it in a visual. If I do this, if I get angry, and if I do this, this is what happens. But if I do this, then I'm usually it's a better choice. So again, they're really good too, sort of behavior maps and consequences. So drawing it out visually for them. Number 8, I need you to slow down your talking or just adapt your communication. And again, these are just some tips that children with autism do better. And communication can be a huge source of anxiety. Our communication, others' communication. So a very low arousal approach if you can, just in terms of speaking slowly and gently. Frequent pauses to allow processing time. So about 8 seconds, and for some children it's longer. So lots of information is lost that we assume that the child has registered that information, but lots of the information is missed because of sometimes difficulty with processing. Try and avoid any sort of make language clear, keep it simple, and do not use any sort of slang or metaphors, and try and get your child's attention, at face level before you're talking to them, and use their name. Make sure that they know that you're talking to them. And again, the visual cues, the visual symbols, the visual pictures, the written instructions, all very good ways to help with communication and slowing it down and keeping it very simple. Give one instruction at a time. Children with autism tend to have very, a lot of difficulty just holding verbal information. So again, one instruction at a time. Instructions may need frequent repetition. So again, maybe using more visuals alongside your verbal, checking their understanding. Sometimes you assume that they understand, but sometimes if you check it, you'll actually know they don't. So just a good idea to check understanding. And try and use them keywords and maybe gestures such as pointing, and just make it very clear to them. And again, tell them the behavior you want them to do. So it's very easy. We're very much don't do that, don't do that. So, label the behavior you want them to stop and tell them then the behavior you want them to do. So for example, Alex, stop spraying water in the mirror. Here is your toothbrush, brush your teeth. And number 9, I need you to explain things very clearly and break things down. So things like lots of ideas around, maybe rules and expected behavior. So making them more clear, more explicit, what's expected, what can I expect, what can others expect, definitely reduces anxiety. And one way to do this is through social stories. So social stories are a written narrative or about a situation, a written event, which includes very specific information about what to expect and why. So it helps with understanding how others might respond, how others might behave, what they might be thinking, and what's going to happen. It promotes understanding of the young person too with autism, and it helps them cope with changes to routine and unexpected distressing events. So it's a very good tool to have as a way to try and reduce anxiety also. And again, some of the applications, there's lots, any sort of thing, any situation you can think of, there's usually an application for social story. So thinking about asking for help, class rules, social skills, play skills, going to the dentist, going to the doctor, going for an operation, accepting no school holidays. So again, keep it individualized to your child. And there is another webinar on social stories that will give a bit more detail on how to maybe write one for your child. So it's just a really good way. And here's some examples as well. So that's taking turns and sharing if I feel angry or upset. So it's just written. And again, they can be age appropriate. You can get, just like social narratives rather than social stories for older children. And again, the language can be adjusted depending on their age and stage. Personal space, things they find difficult, Christmas break, a trip to the zoo, so maybe a school trip. So all of these social stories will really help just make things very clear to them, and again increase predictability as well, and it helps reduce anxiety. And number 10, I need you to understand and get why this is hard for me. So we know that emotional containment can help, really help, when you convey empathy and understanding, and when you name the feelings and when you validate that feeling, that can really help reduce that overwhelm too. So that sort of relational approach, that very supportive, warm approach, can help. So label the feeling. I see you're beginning to feel upset. I see you're sad. And just say that I would feel that way too. That sounds a really tough day that you had. That makes sense. And it was really important to you. And of course you're upset. I understand how much you wanted to win. So by doing that, the child feels heard and then they feel contained. And again, just looking after yourself, it's not easy to do all these steps, and we recognize that. And I suppose it is really important that you get your own time. And I think, other sources of support, we do have tier 2 sessions that are face-to-face across the trust. And these go into more detail on anxiety and autism with other parents. So feedback has been very positive about these sessions and about the support they get from other parents as well. So look, I hope you found that useful. And again, I will see you in part 2 and part 3. I hope you found that useful, and all the very best. Thank you.